Join us for a deep dive into EMR.
Everything you need to know about the method that is revolutionizing the world of trauma.
Ever been in a situation, like where the thought of doing something you used to do every day just fills you with this, like, paralyzing fear?
Oh, absolutely. It's like your brain hits the brakes and says, nope, not happening.
And you're totally stuck. Well, that's what we're diving into today, this whole idea of fear, really debilitating fear after a traumatic experience.
Right, because trauma, it rewires things in your brain, doesn't it?
It does, and we've got this fascinating case study, originally in Hebrew, about a guy named Ran. He's 40 years old, goes through this horrific car accident.
Yeah.
Survives, thankfully, but then
the fear sets in. Makes sense, though, when you think about how we're wired.
that's what I thought was so interesting. It's like his brain learned to be afraid of driving, even the thought of it.
Right, because your brain, after something traumatic, it's on high alert. Like it's trying to protect you from going through that again, so everything gets amplified.
And the case study really gets into how this affected Ran, not just some vague fear, but panic attacks, feeling trapped just thinking about getting behind the wheel.
His world probably shrunk considerably, I imagine.
Totally. So he ends up trying this therapy, EMDR. And I got to admit, the concept threw me at first.
Because it seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, like you'd think, avoid the trauma, right? But EMDR is all about going back there, in a way.
It is. It's about processing the trauma, not pretending it didn't happen. Think of it like you've got this tangled up mess of, I don't know, Christmas lights. EMDR is like slowly, carefully untangling them until you can see how they're supposed to be.
So with Ran, how did they actually do that? Because the source talks about how vivid his memories were, the sensory details, like it all came rushing back.
Yeah, that's the amygdala at work. That's the part of your brain that stores those raw sensory experiences of the trauma. And in EMDR, what they do is they have you revisit those details, but
there's more to it, right?
there is. So while you're revisiting the memory, you're also focusing on something else, a different stimulus. Could be the therapist's hand movements or sounds.
So you're not just lost in the memory, you're kind of grounded in the present, too.
Exactly. And somehow doing both those things at once, it creates new neural pathways in the brain.
So it's like you're rewiring those old fear responses.
That's a great way to put it. Instead of the memory being stuck in the amygdala, all raw and emotional, it starts to get processed by the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain.
So it's not that the memory disappears, it's like you're changing how you react to it.
Yeah, like imagine a photograph. Right. You can adjust the exposure, make it less intense, but it's still the same image. And that's what happened with Ran. The source mentions how he didn't just have one session and boom, everything was fine. It was gradual.
It's like any other kind of learning, really. You don't pick up a guitar and play like Hendrix overnight. It takes practice, repetition to build those new pathways.
Right. And as Ran went through more sessions, his fear, it started to decrease. He could think about driving, even get behind the wheel again, without that same level of panic.
It really speaks to the brain's plasticity, doesn't it? Its ability to heal, to change.
Absolutely. And while our deep dive here focused on Ran and this driving phobia, EMDR is used for so much more than that. PTSD, anxiety, even just processing smaller traumas.
It's pretty amazing stuff. Makes you think, if our brains can learn to be afraid, could we use this kind of approach to learn courage in other areas of our lives?
Now, that is a question worth pondering.
It really is. We could all use a little more courage sometimes, couldn't we?
Couldn't agree more.